What is going on, everybody? It's the Reformation Keegan, and I'm here today with another video. So we're gonna stick on the theme of the Flash, and we have Jeff Johns's or one of his earlier arcs, and that is the Flash Crossfire. So this is actually the original trade for it, and I know they have bigger collections of the Flash by Jeff Johns in volumes. But I found these at one of my local comic shops, and they had most of them. So I just picked these up because they're also cheaper, and the covers by Brian Boland are great. So it's one of the incentives to these earlier trades that came out in the early 2000s. I believe this one came out in 2004. I want to say between 2003 and 2004. Do not quote me on that. But these particular issues were written in 2002 in the earlier stages. So the last one was published in October, which is the Flash 191, which is it's in this Crossfire trade, but it's not actually within the Crossfire story. It's added as an incentive here, and as a little bit of a relation to see Wally's progression. But as many of you already know, I'm a massive Barry Allen fan, but I do really appreciate the characterization of Wally West, and I would say that Jeff Johns' greatest attribute as a writer is his characterization and how he makes every character very relatable. So we have a lot of good things going on within this. We have a lot of really strong characters. We have a lot of homages. One of the things that I like is the little incorporations of Bart with Jay Garrick, and even the conflict of Jay Garrick having to move because Joan has cancer. There's a lot of good little conflicts here that just don't make things very bland and vague. There's a lot of little intricacies that Jeff Johns adds, and it creates a very compelling narrative. One of the things I want to add too is the incorporation of Blacksmith. I think Blacksmith is tremendous. She is fueled off vengeance and fueled off control, and she controls the black market underground, which makes sense because the rogues the rogues are a little bit different in the sense of the rogues are a little more blatant, whereas Blacksmith is a little more kind of underground, no pun intended by that. So the rogues are obviously, they sneakily do things, but they're a little more blatant when it comes to confronting Wally. The incorporation of Captain Cold in this, I think, was really well done. There's a strong sense of leadership that I think that he conveys because he, as a child, did not have that leadership. So he eventually says that the rogues need a new and stronger leader than Blacksmith because Blacksmith's own desires for control and desires for revenge on Goldface are really prominent, and that's ultimately, I think, what costs her victory against Wally. But as I mentioned characterization a bit earlier, I think Wally's really good in this too because Wally's still very inexperienced, and we can see that in his team up with Hawkman, which is an amazing team up, by the way. I recommend it. It's Flash 191. And he's still a little awestruck. He's still that fanboy, even though he can deliver the goods in physical combat. So Wally, it's a part of his charm, but he has to overcome that a little bit to get to the objective at hand, and to also save his wife Linda. So ultimately he does that, but you can still see the inexperience of still being a fanboy for Hawkman, who's been around for generations and generations. And the juxtaposition between the characters is really well done too, because Wally is serious but also fun loving in a way, whereas Carter Hall is a little more serious and doesn't really have a lot of comedy. But he does say that when he speaks with other heroes that Wally would have made his uncle very proud, because by this time, obviously, Barry Allen is deceased due to Crisis on Infinite Earths. So Wally has to take over the mantle of being Scarlet Speedster, aka the Flash. So my favorite part of this, though, I would say there's two parts. One is the Thinker, and the second part would be the Pied Piper. So first I want to start with the Thinker. So the Thinker was a really nice addition to this. His first appearance, I believe, was in the JSA in 2000. I can't remember the exact issue off the top of my head, but he was featured in the JSA. He kind of reminds me of Brainiac in a way, which, I mean, you could even classify him as a bit of a ripoff of Brainiac, but I think the Thinker does what needs to be done here, and that's to give Wally a foil that's a little more mental than physical, because Wally is having to go against AI, just like how Superman has to do that with Brainiac. But the thing is Wally, with electricity and speed, obviously, he can usually run around situations. But the thing is you can't outrun a mental health issue, and that's what happens when Wally has to encounter the Thinker, because the Thinker is already able to process all information, but he needs the strength of Wally. He needs the physical vessel of Wally to object what he needs to get, and that's more control. But the thing is Wally ends up becoming mentally stronger, and he has to outthink the Thinker. He has to outthink a machine that already has all the answers. So this really shows the extra lengths that the human anatomy can go to when it's under physical and emotional duress in order to achieve the end goal. So I thought that was really smart of Geoff Johns to add that here. So the Thinker, I think, was a great foil for Wally, because as I said previously, Wally is still young and still very inexperienced, and a little immature at times. So these encounters, with the Thinker having to control his own mind, but having to almost sell out to get to where he needed to get to, was a really, really nice, strong connotation going forward. But also, I want to discuss the Pied Piper, because I think he's a very interesting character. We can even see earlier on that he doesn't really fit with the rogues, and he kind of has his own sense of individualism that a lot of the rogues, they have, but they really don't have at the same time. So again, that's another theme of simultaneity there, where the rogues have their own identities, but they still kind of rely on each other, whereas the Pied Piper doesn't really rely on anybody. And one of the issues, I believe, is called Rat Race. We have the Pied Piper going through his life story, and he talks about being privileged, but how being privileged as a child is the ultimate detriment, because when you have all these funds placed upon you, you have all these resources placed upon you, you become dependent on those, and you don't become self-sufficient. And that's what happens with the Pied Piper, is he doesn't become self-sufficient because as a child he lacks hearing. But then his parents spend millions and millions of dollars to get the surgery done where he can hear, and he hears better than anybody. So the Pied Piper kind of becomes a victim of circumstance, where he hears all these negative things, whether about him or about society as a whole in Keystone and Central City. Or, on the other hand, he uses that to his advantage, but in a negative way. So the Pied Piper has to go through a lot of trial and error when he's a bit older and past being an adolescent to understand who he truly is. So that's a huge message that Geoff Johns sends, and that message is that privilege does not always equate to prosperity, both mentally, physically, and even emotionally, spiritually too. So I think that's a really strong message in this, because you can see in earlier issues the Pied Piper kind of has this sense of morality, but he's also troubled. So that's another great theme of duality there, where someone can be a troubled individual, but you still see a lot of good in them, because there is this intangible nobility that you can't see, but you can envision it internally. So I think that was a really strong connotation as well. So I think the Pied Piper was a really, really underrated character just throughout this entire Crossfire series, because you have the opportunity to see a sense of vulnerability in a rogue who was a past rogue, and now he's turned a new leaf. But you can see why rogues become rogues, and we see that also with Captain Cold in 182 in the previous Rogues trade, where tragedy and privilege a lot of times can equate to the undermining of human reliability, and that reliability is within oneself to gain a stronger foundation to survive on their own. And then ultimately, to the Pied Piper, he ends up reconciling with his parents due to these inefficiencies. But he ultimately he keeps falling in love with music, even though he's not good at creating it, and he has a sense of identity and vulnerability that a lot of the rogues, maybe outside of Leonard Snart, have not really shown yet. But I will say the conclusion is very interesting, because I want to see what's going to happen with Gorilla Grodd going forward, because he is still contained, and I think all hell's going to break loose in Keystone and Central City. So I'm excited to read the next trade. We're also going to get to Flash Blitz, which is Hunter Zolomon and Wally West. Their relationship is still very strong within Crossfire, but I want to see how that's going to unfold, where we see the Flash take on Zoom, which I'm very, very excited about. So let me know what you guys think. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. We're almost at 500 subscribers. If we can get to 3,000 watch hours, that would be beneficial because then I can put out better content for you going forward as I would be a YouTube partner. And hopefully, if you've read it, you enjoyed the Flash Crossfire. I'm really loving Jeff Johns' run on this, and I can't wait to read more. So please hit the subscribe button, and I'll be back with more soon.